No one in that forgotten industrial district believed a black mechanic, a single father living on society's margins, could achieve what millions of dollars and world-class medicine had failed to deliver. But when a billionaire's Bentley broke down outside his crumbling garage, fate intervened. Within minutes of watching her daughter walk, Randy Carter spotted what over a decade of specialists had missed. The discovery would bring a powerful mother to her knees and force an entire medical system into silence. Sometimes miracles don't come from the top. They rise from the bottom.
Yes, that's perfect.
The morning sun barely reached the industrial district on the south side of the city. Rusted fences lined the cracked streets, and the smell of motor oil hung in the air like a permanent resident. Randy Carter had opened his garage before 6, same as every other day for the past 15 years. His hands, calloused and stained with grease, moved with precision as he worked on an old Chevrolet that had seen better decades. At 42 years old, Randy had learned that life rarely gave second chances to men like him. Black, poor, and without a college degree, he had built everything he owned with those two hands. The garage was small, barely enough room for 2 cars at a time, but it was his. Every bolt, every wrench, every oil-stained rag belonged to him. In the corner of the shop, partially hidden behind a stack of tires, sat a wheelchair. It was old, but meticulously maintained, the leather seat worn smooth from years of use. Randy glanced at it as he always did, a quiet ritual that connected him to a past he could never forget. The wheelchair had belonged to Maya, his wife. She had spent her final 2 years in that chair after a car accident left her paralyzed from the waist down. During those 2 years, Randy had taught himself everything about mobility equipment. He adjusted the armrests when they caused pressure sores. He redesigned the footrests when they made her legs swell. He added custom padding when the standard cushions failed her. Maya passed away 6 years ago from complications related to her injury. But Randy kept the wheelchair, not as a memorial, but as a reminder of what he had learned, that the human body was just another machine, and machines could always be improved if someone cared enough to look closely. The sound of footsteps interrupted his thoughts. His daughter Mia appeared in the doorway, her backpack slung over one shoulder. At 14, she had her mother's eyes and her father's quiet strength. "Dad, I'm heading to school," she called out. Randy wiped his hands on a rag and walked over to her. He pressed a $5 bill into her palm. "For lunch, and don't let Marcus copy your homework again." Mia rolled her eyes but smiled. "He's not copying. I'm tutoring him. There's a difference." "Uh-huh. Big difference between charity and being taken advantage of." She kissed his cheek, leaving a small smudge of grease she didn't notice. "Love you, Dad. Try not to work too hard." Randy watched her walk down the street until she turned the corner. Then he went back to the Chevrolet, back to the rhythm of work that had kept him sane through grief and poverty, and all the small humiliations that came with being invisible in America. 20 miles north, in a mansion that overlooked the city like a throne surveying its kingdom, Sienna Whitmore was beginning her own morning ritual, but hers involved pain. The caregiver, a middle-aged woman named Patricia, helped Sienna sit up in bed. The 15-year-old girl moved slowly, deliberately, as if every motion required careful calculation. "Ready?" Patricia asked, holding up the orthotic brace that Sienna wore from her hips to her ankles. Sienna nodded, though her jaw was already tight with anticipation. The brace was a marvel of modern medicine, titanium alloy, carbon fiber reinforcement, custom-fitted by the best orthopedic specialists money could buy. It cost more than most families earned in a year, and every single day it hurt. Patricia fastened the first strap, and Sienna's fingers gripped the bedsheet. By the time the third strap was secured, a thin line of sweat had formed on her forehead. She had learned years ago not to cry. Crying didn't change anything. She had been 4 years old when the accident happened. She barely remembered life before the wheelchair, before the surgeries, before the endless parade of doctors who all said the same thing. Some discomfort is normal for your condition. Discomfort. Such a clinical word for what felt like fire in her joints. The bedroom door opened, and Lexi Whitmore stepped inside. At 47, Sienna's mother carried herself with the controlled elegance of someone who had fought her way to the top of a male-dominated industry. As CEO of Whitmore Real Estate Holdings, she commanded respect in boardrooms across the country. Her suits cost thousands of dollars. Her time was worth even more. "How are you feeling this morning, sweetheart?" Lexi asked, already glancing at her phone. "Fine," Sienna answered automatically. It was the same exchange they had every morning. The same question, the same answer, the same distance between them that neither knew how to bridge. Lexi looked up briefly, offered a tight smile, and checked her watch. "I have a meeting downtown. I'll be back late tonight. Patricia will take care of everything." Sienna watched her mother leave, the click of designer heels fading down the hallway. She didn't feel anger anymore, just a hollow acceptance. Her mother loved her, Sienna knew that, but Lexi showed love the only way she knew how, by writing checks. The best doctors, the best equipment, the best of everything that could be bought. But no amount of money could buy her mother's presence, and no specialist had ever managed to buy away the pain. The Bentley broke down at approximately 11:15 in the morning, right in the middle of the industrial district where Lexi Whitmore had never set foot in her life. "What do you mean you can't fix it?" Lexi demanded, staring at her driver, a young man named Kevin who looked like he wanted to disappear into the asphalt. "Ma'am, I'm a driver, not a mechanic. The engine just died. I don't know what's wrong with it." Lexi pressed her fingers to her temples. She had a conference call in 45 minutes with investors from Singapore. Her phone had 3% battery, and she was stranded in a neighborhood that looked like it belonged in a documentary about urban decay. "There's a garage down the street," Kevin offered, pointing to a weathered sign that read, "Carter's Auto Repair." Lexi looked at the building with barely concealed disdain. The paint was peeling. A stray cat lounged on the hood of a rusted truck in the lot. This was not the kind of place she trusted with a $200,000 vehicle, but she had no choice. "Fine. Push it there, I'll walk." From the back seat, Sienna spoke up. "Can I get out? My legs are cramping." Lexi hesitated. She hated having Sienna walk in unfamiliar places, hated the stares her daughter attracted, hated being reminded of her own failure to protect her child. But the discomfort in Sienna's voice was real. "Stay close to the car," Lexi instructed. Randy heard them before he saw them, the distinctive rumble of an expensive engine being pushed rather than driven. He stepped out of the garage, wiping his hands, and watched as a young man in a chauffeur's uniform struggled to guide a black Bentley toward his shop. Behind the car walked two women. One was clearly wealthy. Designer clothes, perfect posture, an expression that suggested she had never been inconvenienced in her life. The other was younger, a teenager, moving with a strange, halting gait that immediately caught Randy's attention. "Excuse me," the wealthy woman called out, her voice sharp with impatience. "My car broke down. I need it fixed immediately." Randy nodded slowly, approaching the Bentley. "I can take a look. Might take an hour or two to diagnose." "An hour?" Lexi's eyes widened. "I have a call in less than an hour. Can't you just—" "Ma'am, this isn't a drive-through. I need to find out what's wrong before I can fix it." Lexi opened her mouth to argue, then stopped herself. She was not accustomed to being told no, but something in Randy's calm demeanor made her reconsider. "Fine. How much?" "Depends on the problem. Diagnostic is $50. She pulled out her wallet and handed him a $100 bill without waiting for change. Randy accepted it, folded it into his pocket, and got to work. While the adults conducted their transaction, Sienna had walked a short distance away, trying to stretch her legs. Each step sent a small jolt of pain through her hips, but it was better than sitting. Sitting for too long made the brace dig into her skin in ways that left bruises. Randy glanced up from the engine and found himself watching the girl. His hands continued their work automatically, but his eyes tracked her movement with growing recognition. He saw the way her weight shifted unevenly with each step, favoring her right side. He noticed how her left hip dipped slightly lower than her right. He observed the way she winced, not with every step, but every third step, when her left foot struck the ground. Most people wouldn't notice these details. But Randy had spent 2 years studying exactly this kind of movement, learning to read the language of a body in pain. Something was wrong with her brace. Not the concept of it, but the execution. The angles were off. The weight distribution was incorrect. The device that was supposed to help her was actually hurting her. "That brace," Randy said, almost to himself. "It's causing you pain, isn't it?" Sienna froze. She turned to look at him, her expression a mixture of shock and confusion. Across dozens of doctors and specialists, no one had ever asked her that question. They told her things. They explained her condition. They prescribed medications and adjustments and therapies, but no one had ever simply looked at her and asked. "Yes," she whispered, as if afraid to say it too loudly. "It hurts all the time." Lexi's head snapped up from her phone. "Excuse me?" Randy straightened, meeting the woman's glare without flinching. "I asked your daughter about her brace. The way she's walking, the device isn't fitted properly." For a moment, Lexi simply stared at him. Then her face hardened into something cold and dangerous. "My daughter is treated by the finest orthopedic specialists in the country. Her equipment is state-of-the-art, custom-designed, and cost more than you probably make in 5 years. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a cutting whisper. "You're a car mechanic. You have no right to comment on her medical care." Randy didn't back down. He had faced worse than wealthy anger in his life. "You're right. I'm not a doctor. I'm a mechanic. But I spent 2 years taking care of my wife after she was paralyzed. I built her wheelchair modifications. I adjusted her braces when the doctors said they were fine, but she was still in pain. I learned to see what the specialists missed because they were too busy looking at charts instead of looking at her." He pointed toward Sienna, keeping his voice gentle. "Your daughter's brace is fitted to standard measurements, but her body isn't standard. Look at how she stands. Her left leg is slightly shorter than her right. Her spine has a slight curve. The brace doesn't account for any of that, so every step she takes, she's fighting against a device that's supposed to help her." Lexi's mouth opened, but no words came out. She turned to look at her daughter, really look at her, perhaps for the first time in years. Sienna stood there, tears streaming down her face, but she wasn't crying from pain. She was crying from something far more overwhelming, the shock of being seen. "Mom," she said, her voice cracking, "he's right. It hurts. It always hurts. But every time I tell the doctors, they say, some discomfort is normal. They say, I have to live with it. They never actually look at how I walk. They just look at their computers and their charts and tell me what I should feel." The words hung in the air like an accusation. Lexi felt something crack inside her, a foundation she had built on money and guilt, and the desperate belief that she could fix her daughter by throwing resources at the problem. Randy returned to the Bentley, giving the mother and daughter a moment of privacy. He found the problem quickly. A loose battery connection, probably jostled by a pothole. 10 minutes of work, and the engine purred back to life. "It's fixed," he called out. "Just a loose connection. No charge beyond the diagnostic." Lexi walked over slowly, her earlier arrogance completely gone. She looked like a woman who had just received news she didn't know how to process. "I'm sorry for how I spoke to you," she said quietly. The words seemed to cost her something. Randy shrugged. "You're protecting your daughter. Nothing wrong with that." She handed him another $100 despite his protest. Then she helped Sienna back into the car, moving with a gentleness that hadn't been there before. As the Bentley pulled away, Sienna turned in her seat to look back at the garage. Through the rear window, she watched Randy return to his work, just another man in a forgotten neighborhood, already invisible again. But Lexi saw that look in the rearview mirror, the hope in her daughter's eyes, directed at a stranger who had done what specialists never bothered to do. And for the first time, Lexi Whitmore began to doubt everything she thought she knew about saving her daughter. That night, Lexi Whitmore did not sleep. She lay in her king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling of her $20 million mansion, replaying the mechanic's words over and over in her mind. The way he had looked at Sienna. The way he had seen what no one else had bothered to see. At 2 in the morning, she gave up on rest and walked down the hallway to her daughter's room. The door was slightly open, and a sliver of moonlight fell across Sienna's sleeping form. Lexi stepped inside quietly, moving with the careful silence of guilt. She sat on the edge of the bed and gently lifted the blanket covering Sienna's legs. What she saw made her stomach turn. Red marks. Deep, angry lines where the brace had pressed into her daughter's skin. Some of them had faded to purple bruises. Others looked fresh, raw, painful. How long had these been here? How many mornings had Patricia strapped that device onto her daughter while Lexi rushed off to meetings and conference calls? How many nights had Sienna undressed alone, hiding these marks from a mother who was never present enough to notice? Lexi pressed her hand to her mouth, holding back a sound that might wake her daughter. Memories flooded back unbidden, the screech of tires, the shattering of glass, her own voice screaming as the world spun around her. She had been on the phone with her office when the other car ran the red light. She had been distracted, arguing about quarterly projections, when her 4-year-old daughter's spine was shattered in the back seat. Lexi walked out of the room and did not stop walking until she reached her home office. She sat in the dark for a long time, thinking about money and guilt and the lies we tell ourselves about what love looks like. By dawn, she had made a decision. Randy was surprised to see the Bentley pull up to his garage the next morning. He was even more surprised to see Lexi Whitmore step out alone, without her driver, without her daughter, without the armor of arrogance she had worn the day before. "I need to talk to you," she said. Randy set down his wrench and wiped his hands. "Your car's running fine. I checked the connection twice. It's not about the car." She looked different today. The designer suit was replaced by simple slacks and a blouse. Her hair was pulled back loosely, and the dark circles under her eyes suggested she had slept about as well as he had. "I want you to look at my daughter's brace," Lexi said. "I want you to tell me if you can help her." Randy shook his head slowly. "Ma'am, I told you yesterday, I'm not a doctor. I fix cars. What you need is a specialist who actually listens." "I've had specialists," Lexi said, her voice cracking slightly. "I've had the best in the country, the best in the world. They gave me charts and treatment plans and progress reports. They billed me hundreds of thousands of dollars. And my daughter is still in pain every single day." She took a step closer, and Randy saw something in her eyes he recognized, the desperate hope of someone who had run out of options. "Yesterday, you looked at Sienna for 5 minutes and saw what years of doctors missed. I don't know how, I don't know why, but I'm asking you, please, just look at her brace. Tell me what you see. If you can't help, I'll leave and never bother you again." Randy thought about Maya. He thought about the nights he had spent adjusting her wheelchair, the mornings he had modified her braces, the small victories that had meant everything to her, even as her body failed. He had never been able to save his wife, but he had made her comfortable. He had given her dignity in her final years. Maybe that was worth something. "Bring her tomorrow," Randy said finally. "I'll take a look, but I'm not promising anything." Sienna arrived at the garage the following afternoon, accompanied by her mother. Patricia had helped her dress that morning, but Lexi had insisted on driving her daughter herself. It was a small change, but Sienna noticed. She had never been anywhere like this garage, a world of oil stains and metal shelves and tools whose purposes she could not begin to guess. Randy did not touch her brace immediately. Instead, he watched. "Walk for me," he said, "just like you normally would, across the garage and back." Sienna obeyed, conscious of his eyes tracking her every movement. She felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with her clothing. "Now sit down on that stool. Stand up again. Turn around slowly." For nearly an hour, Randy did nothing but observe. He watched how her weight shifted when she stood. He noticed the slight rotation in her hips when she turned. He saw the way her shoulders compensated for the imbalance in her lower body, creating tension that probably caused headaches she had learned to ignore. Lexi stood in the corner, arms crossed, struggling to stay silent. She wanted to ask questions, to demand progress, to control the situation as she controlled everything else in her life. But something about Randy's quiet concentration made her hold her tongue. The garage door opened, and Mia walked in, home from school. She stopped short when she saw the visitors, her eyes widening with recognition. "Oh, hi!" Sienna looked up, grateful for the interruption. "Hi, I'm Sienna." "I know. I remember. From yesterday." Mia glanced at her father, who nodded slightly. "I'm Mia." The two girls studied each other with the cautious curiosity of teenagers from different worlds. Sienna saw a girl her own age with confident eyes and worn sneakers, someone who probably had friends and freedom and a life that didn't revolve around doctor's appointments. Mia saw a girl trapped in a metal cage, beautiful and sad and desperately lonely. "Do you want something to drink?" Mia offered. "We have water, and more water. Sometimes lemonade if Dad remembered to buy lemons." Sienna smiled, a real smile, not the polite mask she wore for strangers. "Water is fine." While Randy continued his examination, the two girls sat on overturned crates in the corner of the garage, talking in low voices. Lexi watched them with a strange ache in her chest. She could not remember the last time Sienna had spoken so easily with someone her own age. "Can I ask you something?" Mia said, handing Sienna a bottle of water. "Sure. What would you do if you didn't have to wear that brace? Like, if you could do anything?" Sienna opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. The question was so simple, yet she had no response. She had spent so long defining herself by her limitations. She had never allowed herself to imagine a life without them. "I don't know," she admitted. "I've never really thought about it." Mia nodded as if this made perfect sense. "My mom was in a wheelchair before she died. Dad used to make her all kinds of stuff to help her move around. She always said the best part wasn't the equipment. It was that someone cared enough to try." Sienna looked across the garage at Randy, who was now carefully removing her brace with gentle hands. For the first time in years, she felt something dangerous stirring in her chest. Hope. Randy laid the brace on his workbench and examined it the way he would examine a malfunctioning engine. His fingers traced the contours, tested the joints, measured the angles with a practiced eye. "Here," he said finally, pointing to a section near the hip joint. "And here, and here." Lexi moved closer, not understanding what she was looking at. "What is it?" "This brace was made to standard specifications. Very high quality, very expensive. But your daughter's body isn't standard." He picked up a measuring tape and knelt beside Sienna. "May I?" She nodded. Randy measured carefully, noting each number in a small notebook. When he finished, he stood and showed Lexi the results. Her left leg is about 1.5 centimeters shorter than her right. Her spine curves slightly to compensate for the old injury. These are small differences, small enough that a doctor looking at X-rays might not prioritize them. But when you strap a rigid brace to a body that doesn't match its design, every step becomes a fight. He tapped the brace on the workbench. The doctors kept giving her new braces in bigger sizes as she grew, but nobody adjusted for her specific anatomy. They treated her like a set of measurements instead of a person. Lexi stared at the brace as if seeing it for the first time. All those specialists, all those consultations, all that money. And the problem had been this simple, this tragically, painfully simple. "Can you fix it?" she whispered. Randy hesitated. "I can try to adjust it. But I want to be honest with you. I might make it worse before I make it better. This isn't my area of expertise. I'm learning as I go. I don't care. Try." The first attempt was a disaster. Randy spent 3 days modifying the brace, adjusting angles and adding custom padding. When Sienna put it on and tried to walk, she made it 4 steps before collapsing. Her knee struck the concrete floor and blood bloomed through her jeans. Lexi was at her side in an instant, cradling her daughter, turning to Randy with fury in her eyes. "What did you do? You made it worse. I should never have trusted—" She stopped herself, but the words hung in the air, sharp and poisonous. Randy said nothing. He helped Sienna to a chair, cleaned her wound with supplies from a first aid kit, and wrapped her knee with the careful attention of someone who had done this many times before. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I miscalculated the angle. I'll start over." Sienna grabbed his hand before he could pull away. "Don't stop," she said. "Please. This is the first time anyone has actually tried to understand why I hurt. Everyone else just tells me to live with it. You're the first person who's trying to fix it." She turned to her mother, and there was something new in her voice, a strength that had been buried under years of resignation. "Mom, I know you're scared. I know you want to protect me. But I've been in pain my whole life. What's a scraped knee compared to that? Let him try." Lexi looked at her daughter, really looked at her, and felt the walls she had built around her heart begin to crumble. Later that evening, after Sienna's knee had been properly bandaged and Mia had taken her to the back of the garage to show her some old car magazines, Lexi found herself sitting across from Randy. The fury had drained out of her, replaced by something raw and exhausted. "I owe you an explanation," she said quietly. Randy waited, and then Lexi told him about the accident, about the phone call she had been taking, the argument about numbers that had seemed so important at the time, about the moment of impact that had changed everything, about waking up in the hospital without a scratch while her 4-year-old daughter underwent emergency spinal surgery. "I was supposed to protect her," Lexi said, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's what mothers do. And instead, I destroyed her life because I couldn't put down my phone for 10 minutes. Randy listened without interrupting. When she finished, he spoke carefully. "You're not a bad person. You made a mistake, and you've been trying to make up for it ever since. But you can't buy forgiveness. You can't write a check for redemption." He gestured around the small garage. "When my wife was dying, I worked myself to exhaustion trying to fix things that couldn't be fixed. I thought if I just tried hard enough, I could make everything okay. But what she needed wasn't my solutions. She needed me to be present, to sit with her, to listen." He looked toward the back of the garage, where Sienna and Mia were laughing over something in a magazine. "Your daughter doesn't need the best doctors or the most expensive equipment. She needs her mother to stop running and start seeing her." That night, Randy made a decision. He would not modify the existing brace. He would build a new one from scratch. It was insane. He had no medical training, no engineering degree, no resources beyond his tools and his intuition. But he had something the specialists lacked. He had watched a body fight against inadequate equipment before. He had learned through trial and error what worked and what didn't. He worked through the night, sketching designs on scrap paper, measuring and remeasuring the notes he had taken of Sienna's body. He sourced materials from his garage: lightweight aluminum alloy from an old aircraft part, dense foam padding from a project he had never finished, leather straps soft enough not to chafe. When Mia came down the next morning, she found her father surrounded by metal and sketches, looking exhausted but more alive than she had seen him in years. "You're building it yourself," she said. It wasn't a question. "I'm going to try." Mia sat down beside him and picked up a piece of aluminum. "Tell me what to do." They worked together, father and daughter, just as they had worked together years ago when Maya was still alive. Mia held pieces in place while Randy welded. She handed him tools before he asked for them, anticipating his needs with the instinct of someone who had grown up in this garage. And when Sienna arrived later that day, driven by her mother, not Patricia, she found herself drawn into the process too, not as a patient but as a participant. For the first time in her life, Sienna felt useful. She could not build or weld, but she could describe exactly where the pain was worst, exactly how the old brace had failed her. Randy listened to every word, adjusting his designs based on her feedback. And between the work, something unexpected happened. Sienna and Mia became friends. They discovered they both loved the same obscure band that nobody at their respective schools had heard of. They argued about whether the book was better than the movie adaptation. They shared secrets and fears and the small humiliations of being teenage girls in a world that seemed designed to make them feel inadequate. One afternoon, Lexi arrived to find her daughter laughing. Really laughing, the kind of laughter that came from the belly and lit up her whole face. She stood in the doorway of the garage, frozen by the sound. She could not remember the last time she had heard Sienna laugh like that. The trouble began with a phone call. Lexi had mentioned the project to a friend at a charity gala. Just a passing comment about exploring alternative treatments for Sienna. She did not think anything of it until her phone rang 3 days later. The caller was a representative from Orthotech, the company that manufactured Sienna's brace. His voice was polite but carried an unmistakable edge. "Mrs. Whitmore, we've heard some concerning rumors about your daughter's care. We understand you've engaged an unlicensed individual to modify medical equipment. We wanted to reach out and express our concern." Lexi's blood ran cold. "Where did you hear that?" "We have many friends in the medical community. The point is, Mrs. Whitmore, that medical devices are subject to strict regulations. If an unqualified person makes modifications that result in injury, there could be serious legal consequences for everyone involved." The threat was clear, even wrapped in professional courtesy. 2 days later, a lawyer appeared at Randy's garage with a cease and desist letter. The document was dense with legal jargon, but the message was simple: stop immediately or face prosecution for practicing medicine without a license. "I'm not practicing medicine," Randy said, staring at the paper. "I'm building a piece of equipment." The lawyer smiled without warmth. "That's not how a court would see it. Medical devices require FDA approval. Manufacturing them without certification is a federal offense. I'm sure you don't want that kind of trouble." After the lawyer left, Randy sat alone in his garage, the letter crumpled in his fist. He had known this was a risk. He had known the system would not welcome interference from someone like him. But knowing and experiencing were different things. The next day, 2 police officers showed up to inspect his business license. They found nothing wrong, but they asked a lot of questions about his side projects and made it clear that someone important was watching. The day after that, his landlord called to say he had received complaints about illegal activity at the garage. If Randy didn't clean up his act, there might be consequences. And in the neighborhood, whispers began to spread. People who had known Randy for years suddenly avoided eye contact. A mechanic who messed with rich people's business was a mechanic who brought trouble to everyone around him. Mia came home from school with red eyes and a split lip. Randy dropped everything, kneeling before his daughter with hands that trembled despite his efforts to stay calm. "What happened? Who did this?" Mia shook her head, refusing to name names. "Some kids were talking. They said you think you're better than real doctors. They said you're going to get arrested." Her voice cracked. "They said you're going to lose me." Randy pulled her into his arms and held her tight, feeling her tears soak through his shirt. He had survived poverty. He had survived grief. He had survived the 1,000 small indignities of being black in America. But he could not survive watching his daughter pay the price for his choices. That night, after Mia had gone to bed, Randy sat alone in the garage. The half-finished brace lay on his workbench, gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Beside it sat Maya's old wheelchair, silent witness to all his failures and all his dreams. He had been foolish to think he could help, foolish to think that skill and compassion could overcome the walls that society built around people like him. The system was designed to protect itself, and he was nothing but a threat to be eliminated. He picked up his phone and called Lexi. "I can't continue," he said, his voice flat with exhaustion. "They're threatening my business. They're threatening my daughter. I'm sorry, but I have to stop." On the other end of the line, Lexi was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was heavy with understanding. "I don't blame you. You've already done more than anyone else ever tried. I'm sorry I brought this into your life." What neither of them knew was that Sienna was listening from the hallway of the mansion, her hand pressed to her mouth, tears streaming silently down her face. 3 days passed. Randy went through the motions of work, but his heart was not in it. The half-finished brace sat untouched on his workbench, a monument to abandoned hope. Mia watched her father with growing concern. She had never seen him like this, not even after her mother died. That grief had been sharp and terrible, but it had also been clean. This was something different. This was defeat. On the 4th night, she went to the garage after dinner. She found Randy sitting in the dark, staring at nothing. "Dad?" He did not respond. Mia walked to the corner where her mother's wheelchair sat. Behind it, on a dusty shelf, was a cardboard box she had not opened in years. She pulled it down and set it in front of her father. "Do you remember what's in here?" Randy looked at the box, but did not move. Mia opened it herself. Inside were photographs, her father and mother, young and smiling, before the accident that changed everything. There were also pieces of equipment, a crude armrest, a modified footplate, a lumbar support cushion that Randy had sewn himself. "You made all of these for Mom. When the doctor said she had to live with her pain, you refused to accept it. You stayed up night after night trying to make her life a little bit easier." She held up the lumbar cushion, worn smooth by years of use. "Mom told me once that this cushion was worth more than all the fancy equipment the hospital gave her. Because it was made with love. Because you saw her as a person, not just a patient." Randy's jaw tightened. His eyes glistened in the dim light. "That was different. Your mother was my wife." "So what? Sienna is someone's daughter. She's in pain, and you're the only person who's ever really tried to help her." Mia knelt beside her father, forcing him to meet her eyes. "You told me that what you did for Mom wasn't meaningless. You said it taught you how to love through action. Well, Sienna needs that too. She needs someone who won't give up on her just because it's hard." Before Randy could respond, Mia pulled out her phone. "Sienna sent me a message. She wanted me to read it to you." She cleared her throat and began. "Mr. Randy, I know you probably won't see this, but I wanted to tell you something. Whether you succeed or fail, I will always be grateful for those few days when someone actually saw me. You looked at me like I was a human being instead of a problem to be solved. Thank you for that. It meant more than you'll ever know." Mia lowered the phone. Her father was crying now, silent tears carving tracks through the grease on his cheeks. Dad, I know you're scared. I know you want to protect me. But some things are more important than being safe. She put her hand on his. Mom would want you to finish this, and so do I. Randy looked at the photographs in the box, at the crude devices he had built with hope and desperation and love. He thought about Maya, about her smile on the days when something he made actually helped. He thought about Sienna, about the light in her eyes when she realized someone was finally listening. He stood up slowly, his joints aching, his heart heavy but no longer hollow. "Hand me that wrench," he said to his daughter. "We have work to do." Randy worked for 7 more days. He barely slept, barely ate, driven by something deeper than determination. Mia brought him sandwiches he forgot to finish and coffee that went cold on his workbench. She did not complain. She understood that her father was fighting a battle that had nothing to do with metal and everything to do with redemption. The brace took shape slowly, piece by piece. It was not beautiful. It lacked the sleek polish of medical-grade equipment, the gleaming finish of technology that cost more than cars. But every joint was calibrated to Sienna's exact measurements. Every strap was positioned to avoid the pressure points that had caused her so much pain. Every angle was adjusted for the slight curve in her spine, the difference in her leg length, the unique architecture of a body that had never fit standard specifications. On the morning of the 8th day, Randy set down his tools and stepped back. The brace lay on his workbench, complete. It was made of aluminum alloy salvaged from aircraft parts, padded with dense foam, fitted with leather straps soft enough to leave no marks. It looked like something from another era, handcrafted, imperfect, human. Mia stood beside her father, studying his work with quiet pride. "It's ready," Randy said. The words came out heavy, weighted with everything they carried. "Are you going to call them?" Randy nodded slowly. His hands were shaking as he picked up the phone. Lexi arrived at the garage within the hour, Sienna beside her. Neither of them spoke during the drive. The silence between them was different now. Not the cold distance of before, but the breathless anticipation of people standing at the edge of something they were afraid to name. The garage looked the same as always, cluttered, oil-stained, filled with the debris of a working man's life. But today it felt sacred, like a temple where prayers might finally be answered. Randy stood near his workbench, the brace in his hands. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, grease still marking his forearms. But there was something steady in his gaze, a calm that came from having done everything he could. "Before we start," he said, "I need you to understand something. I'm not a doctor. I don't have a medical degree or FDA approval or any of the things that are supposed to make equipment like this legitimate." He held up the brace. "This is just my best guess, based on watching your daughter and remembering what I learned taking care of my wife. It might work. It might not. I can't promise you a miracle." Lexi stepped forward. The woman who had once looked at Randy with contempt now looked at him with something closer to reverence. "You've already given us more than any miracle," she said. "You gave us hope." Sienna moved past her mother, her eyes fixed on the brace. She reached out and touched it gently, feeling the smooth metal, the soft padding. "Can I try it now?" Randy knelt before her, helping her remove the old brace with careful hands. The red marks on her skin were fading now, but the memory of them remained. When the last strap came loose, Sienna took a deep breath. For the first time in as long as she could remember, her legs were completely free. Then, piece by piece, Randy fitted the new brace onto her body. He adjusted each strap with microscopic precision, checking and rechecking the alignment. His fingers moved with the confidence of a man who had done this many times before. Not on strangers in hospitals, but on someone he loved. When he finished, he stood and stepped back. Try standing. Sienna gripped the edge of the workbench and pushed herself up. The brace held her steady, supporting her weight without the grinding resistance she had grown accustomed to. She stood there for a moment, testing her balance, waiting for the familiar pain to announce itself. It did not come. Now try walking, slowly, one step at a time. Sienna released the workbench. Her first step was tentative, hesitant, the learned caution of someone who expected to be hurt. Nothing. Her second step was slightly bolder. Her weight shifted from one leg to the other, and still the pain did not come. By the third step, her eyes were wide with disbelief. By the fourth, tears were streaming down her face. "It doesn't hurt." Her voice cracked on the words. "Mom, it doesn't hurt." She took another step, and another, walking across the garage floor with growing confidence. Her gait was still uneven. Years of compensating for a bad brace had trained her muscles wrong, but the agony that had accompanied every movement was gone. Sienna turned and walked back toward them, laughing through her tears. She walked to her mother and collapsed into her arms, both of them crying now, holding each other in the middle of a garage that smelled like motor oil and possibility. Lexi looked up at Randy over her daughter's shoulder. Her face was wet, her composure completely shattered. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. What could she say? What words existed for a moment like this? Finally, she managed a single broken sentence. "I spent so long looking for the best doctors, the best technology, the best of everything money could buy." She shook her head slowly. And what Sienna needed was someone who would actually look at her, someone who would listen, someone who cared enough to see what everyone else missed. Randy stood apart from them, uncomfortable with the weight of their gratitude. He had not done this for praise or recognition. He had done it because a girl was in pain and he knew how to help. It was that simple. "She's going to need physical therapy," he said quietly. "Her muscles have been compensating for the wrong brace for a long time. The brace helps, but she'll need to relearn how to walk properly." Lexi nodded, wiping her eyes. "I'll find the best physical therapist in the country. And maybe this time," Randy added gently, "you could be there with her, not just paying for it, actually there." The words landed softly without accusation. Lexi received them the same way, not as criticism, but as guidance from someone who understood the difference between providing for a person and being present for them. "I will," she promised. "I will." The story did not end there. Orthotech's lawyers sent another letter threatening legal action for the unlicensed manufacture of medical devices. But this time, Lexi was prepared. She hired a team of attorneys, the best money could buy, now used for a purpose that actually mattered. She went public with the story not to shame the medical establishment, but to shine a light on its failures. News outlets across the country picked up the headline, "Black Mechanic Succeeds Where Specialists Failed." The coverage was explosive. People saw Randy's photograph and read about his background, the poverty, the lack of formal education, the wife he had lost. They learned about Sienna's years of pain and the specialists who had dismissed her suffering as normal. And they watched videos of her walking without agony for the first time in her memory. Orthotech found itself facing something far worse than a lawsuit: public outrage. Within weeks, the company announced a comprehensive review of its brace design process, promising to incorporate more personalized fitting procedures and patient feedback. A renowned orthopedic surgeon named Dr. Marcus Webb requested permission to examine Randy's brace. He spent 3 hours with the device, turning it over in his hands, testing the joints, measuring the angles. When he finished, he sat down with Randy and spoke to him as one professional to another. "I want to be honest with you. When I first heard about this case, I was skeptical. A mechanic building medical equipment in a garage sounds like a liability lawsuit waiting to happen." Dr. Webb set the brace down carefully. "But looking at this, I have to admit, you didn't do anything wrong. The engineering is sound. The measurements are precise. The materials are appropriate for the application. He leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. Do you know what the real difference is between this brace and the ones we build in medical facilities? It's not technology. It's not training. It's attention. You spent hours watching how she moved. You listened when she told you where it hurt. You built something specifically for her body, not for a statistical average. He shook his head slowly. We get so focused on standardization and efficiency that we forget every patient is unique. You reminded us of that. Randy did not know how to respond. He had never thought of himself as someone who could teach doctors anything. I'm just a mechanic, he said finally. I fix things. That's all I know how to do. Dr. Webb smiled. Sometimes that's exactly what medicine needs. 6 months later, the garage looked almost the same as it always had. The same cluttered shelves, the same oil-stained floor, the same afternoon light filtering through dusty windows. But in one corner, something new had appeared. A small workspace, separate from the car repair area, equipped with measuring tools and materials for building mobility equipment. A hand-painted sign hung above it. Maya's Corner, free consultations. Randy had started quietly, just helping a few neighbors who had heard about what he did for Sienna. A grandmother whose wheelchair kept tipping, a construction worker whose prosthetic leg never fit right after his amputation, a teenager whose back brace caused more problems than it solved. He did not charge them. He did not advertise. He simply listened to their pain and did what he could to help. The money Lexi had tried to give him sat untouched in a bank account. Randy had accepted it only because she insisted, only because she said it was for Mia's college fund. He never touched a cent of it for himself. He still fixed cars for a living. He still lived in the same small house in the same poor neighborhood. He had not become famous or wealthy or transformed into someone the world would consider successful. But he was happy. For the first time since Maya died, Randy Carter was truly happy. On a warm afternoon in early autumn, a familiar Bentley pulled up outside the garage. But this time, there was no breakdown, no emergency, no crisis to solve. Lexi stepped out of the driver's seat. She had started driving herself lately, leaving Kevin at home. From the passenger side emerged Sienna, moving with a confidence that would have been unimaginable a year ago. She still wore the brace Randy had built, but physical therapy had transformed her gait. She walked now like someone who trusted her own body. "Mia!" Sienna called out, spotting her friend inside the garage. Mia emerged from behind a car she had been helping her father repair, wiping her hands on a rag. Her face lit up at the sight of her friend. "You're early. I thought you weren't coming until 3. Mom drove fast. The two girls embraced, then disappeared into the back of the garage, their laughter echoing off the metal walls. They had plans to work on a school project together, though Randy suspected more time would be spent talking than working. Lexi walked slowly toward Randy, who had straightened up from his work to greet her. She looked different than she had on that first day, softer somehow, less armored. She had reduced her work hours drastically, delegating more responsibilities to her executive team. The world had not collapsed without her constant attention. If anything, it had improved. She had also established a foundation in Maya's name, funding research into personalized mobility equipment and providing free consultations for families who could not afford specialists. Randy sat on the advisory board, though he still felt uncomfortable in meetings where people wore suits and spoke in acronyms. Now Lexi stood before him in the garage, where everything had changed, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Words felt inadequate for what had passed between them, the fear and hope and transformation that had bound two strangers from opposite worlds. Then Lexi stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. Randy stiffened for just a moment, surprised by the contact. Then he relaxed and returned the embrace, his oil-stained hands gentle against her back. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for my daughter, for teaching me what I was too blind to see. Randy patted her back softly. You would have figured it out eventually. You love her. That's what matters. Lexi pulled back, wiping her eyes with a small laugh. I should let you get back to work. I just wanted to bring Sienna over, and to see you. Randy nodded. You're welcome here any time, both of you. He watched her walk back to her car, watched her drive away with a small wave through the window. Then he turned and went back to the engine he had been working on, falling into the familiar rhythm of wrenches and bolts and the quiet satisfaction of fixing things. In the back of the garage, Maya's wheelchair sat in its corner, still perfectly maintained, still waiting. Beside it, in the workspace he had built, a new project was taking shape. A modified walker for an elderly man down the street whose arthritis made standard equipment painful to use. Randy Carter was not a doctor. He was not a hero. He was just a mechanic who had learned, through loss and love, that the most important things in life could not be bought or standardized or mass-produced. They could only be built, one careful piece at a time, by hands that refused to stop trying. And sometimes, in a crumbling garage on the wrong side of town, that was enough to change everything.